Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to unpack a seriously thrilling, high stakes heist that secretly altered the entire course of the American Civil War. We are looking at a story of absolute desperation, cutting edge gadgetry, and a massive internal betrayal that literally almost brought the United States to its knees. It's just a fascinating sequence of events, and I am so incredibly excited to guide you through this narrative to see exactly how it all unfolded. Okay, let's dive right in. We start right in the thick of things with this desperate whisper from President Abraham Lincoln to Captain Jack Bishop. Now, Bishop had just been named the Union's very first shadowed operative by Secretary of War Edwin Stanton. See, the Union was at a breaking point. Their treasury was draining fast, and they simply couldn't survive a prolonged, grinding war of attrition. So they concocted this covert, highly controversial mission. The plan? They were going to secretly offer Jefferson Davis a massive bribe to simply walk away and dissolve the Confederacy, before the country completely drowned in blood.
The crucial point to understand here is the sheer, staggering physical prize on the line, $1 million in Union gold bullion. We aren't just talking about a quiet political negotiation. This was a massive, impossibly heavy fortune meant to literally buy peace. President Lincoln warned Bishop that if Jefferson Davis accepted, the rebellion would end. But on the flip side, if the mission failed, or worse, if the public ever found out the Union tried to just pay the rebellion away, the nation would fracture beyond repair.
I want you to imagine being in Captain Bishop's shoes for a second. You're riding through pitch-dark, contested territory near the Virginia border on a rattling Baltimore and Ohio train. The gold is secured in a fortified rear cargo car. You're surrounded by the sharp smell of coal smoke and wet pine, and the rhythmic mechanical chugging of that locomotive feels less like a train ride and more like a literal ticking clock, just counting down the fate of the nation. To protect this immense treasure, Bishop is relying on some brilliant, albeit eccentric gadgets designed by a recluse Union scientist named Phineas Phillips. Phineas operated out of a cluttered basement, but his tech was absolutely unparalleled for the time. Just looking at the schematic of this galvanic pocket watch, you get a real sense of the high-tech lengths they went to. Inside, a battery-powered galvanic needle is meticulously wired to a pressure plate sitting directly under the gold. If that gold is lifted even a fraction of an inch, boom, the needle drops. But for the moment, Bishop's needle is dead center. Well, even with the tech confirming the gold is safe, Bishop decides to do a physical sweep anyway. He picks the heavy padlock on the cargo car door, steps inside, and you can almost feel a stomach drop, right? The carriage is totally empty. The massive iron-bound crates are gone, and the guards, Corporal Miller and Private Vance, are just missing without a trace. Bishop looks closer and finds that the wires to his galvanic watch have been cleanly severed and spliced with a perfectly measured copper bypass. Then, suddenly he hears it. A faint, rhythmic clicking sound echoing from the ceiling. They haven't left the train at all. They are moving the gold up to the roof. So Bishop rushes outside to climb the iron ladder to the roof, actively battling gale force winds. He pulls out another one of Phineas's inventions, the atmospheric grapple. He fully expects it to fire high-tensile steel claws and hoist him up to safety. Instead, when he pulls the trigger, it erupts the sweet-smelling emerald knockout gas directly into his face. Think about that betrayal for a second. Phineas Phillips, the very guy who invented the gadget, didn't design this tool to help Bishop out of a tight spot. He designed it specifically to knock him out cold, proving that the Union's brilliant scientist was actually the mastermind behind the entire heist. Bishop wakes up about 30 minutes later with a violently pounding head. The clicking on the roof has stopped, and the side door of the cargo car is just swinging wide open. And now we see the true genius of Phineas's treason. $1 million in gold weighs over 2 tons. How on earth do you move 2 tons off a speeding train? You certainly don't drop it. The wooden crates would completely shatter on impact. But noticing some heavy black grease on the doorframe, Bishop realizes Phineas actually lined the shipment in prototype impact-absorbing pneumatic pods. They literally just rolled this aerodynamic rubberized capsule right out the open door at a precise mile marker where it bounced safely into a ditch to a waiting transport wagon. Bishop pulls the emergency brake and leaps out into the damp Virginia wilderness. He's entirely alone out there in the dark, but he forces his mind to work logically. Let's see how he builds his deduction by breaking down the physical constraints of the heist step by step, just like Phineas would. Step 1. 2 tons is an astronomical weight for a wagon. Step 2. The muddy Virginia backroads will quickly exhaust heavily loaded horses in a matter of miles. Therefore, step 3, Phineas absolutely must be moving the gold by water. By stepping directly into the mind of a rogue genius, Bishop actually maps the local topography in his head. A standard rowboat would immediately capsize under 2 tons of solid metal. They need a massive, flat-bottomed barge. And in this specific remote area, there's only one slipway with a deep water channel capable of launching a vessel that size, the Forest Spring Ferry Terminal. It's just a flawless piece of deduction, and Bishop knows he has to get there before that barge launches. But here's the reality. Bishop is just one man holding an 8-shot revolver. He cannot take down a professional, heavily armed heist crew by himself. So he sprints to a nearby homestead and practically kicks the front door down. He flashes his Secret Service badge and desperately recruits Jonas Haskell, a stern, fiercely loyal Union farmer, along with his 3 heavily built sons, Ephraim, Silas, and James. No fancy gadgets here, folks, just federal promises and heavy rifles. Bishop promises them a massive federal reward, and the Haskells grab their weapons, totally ready to ride. Racing toward the river on the Haskells' sturdiest horses, they suddenly find forensic evidence in the dirt that perfectly proves Bishop's theory. The road is violently gouged with massive, deep parallel ruts. They even find a heavy wooden fence post that's been completely splintered by an incredibly wide axle. This physical toll confirms that the overloaded wagon is straining the horses to their absolute limits, which means the thieves are moving slowly. They haven't escaped just yet. The crew finally arrives at the Forest Spring waterfront just as the clouds part, and there it is, a massive barge and Phineas's gleaming pneumatic pod. But there's a serious problem. A half-dozen heavily armed professionals are rigging a pulley system to hoist the pod. They have the high ground on the pier, and they would absolutely cut a cavalry charge to pieces. Bishop realizes these guys are expecting disciplined soldiers, not a local nuisance. So he sheds his tailored federal wool coat, throws on Jonas's mud-stained farm jacket and hat, literally smears river mud all over his face, and prepares to execute a highly dangerous, slightly ridiculous theatrical distraction, the drunken decoy. Watch how beautifully this plays out. It's like absolute clockwork. At exactly 0 seconds, Bishop stumbles onto the pier, swinging an empty canteen and loudly, clumsily singing "The Girl I Left Behind Me." He trips and falls face first onto the wooden deck. By 30 seconds, the guards completely relax, laughing off what they assume is just some blind drunk local river rat. At 60 seconds, Bishop stammers right up to the crew's leader, and when the leader roughly shoves him back, Bishop drops the act instantly. He pulls his hidden 8-shot revolver, jams it right under the leader's chin, and lets out a piercing whistle. By 90 seconds, the Haskells charge out of the heavy brush with their rifles leveled. The panicked guards surrender immediately. Just like that, the gold is secure without a single casualty. Bishop tightly secures the gold and wires the War Department from a nearby railway station. But the aftermath brings some pretty grim news from Secretary Stanton. A telegram arrives stating that Phineas Phillips has vanished entirely from Washington. His lab was aggressively searched, but all his schematics and prototypes were already destroyed. The genius inventor successfully erased every trace of his existence. As the telegram says, they are literally hunting a ghost. So, the gold was saved. But impartially looking at the political reality of what happened next, it was far different than the Union ever intended. The original mission was to secretly pay off Jefferson Davis to end the war, right? But the actual outcome? A Confederate sympathizer working in the telegraph office intercepted faint whispers of the missing gold. The leak reached Richmond, and Jefferson Davis, deeply insulted by what he saw as a dishonorable bribe attempt, publicly rejected peace and aggressively rallied his forces. Ultimately, the Grand Compromise was a catastrophic failure, ensuring the brutal Civil War would bitterly grind on. Now, what's really fascinating about this is the masterful political spin that followed. By dawn, the administration's relentless propaganda machine was working overtime. They completely hid the reality of their desperate bribe and internal betrayal. Instead, newspaper headlines boldly framed the whole ordeal as a brilliant, pre-planned Union sting operation. Captain Jack Bishop was painted as a national hero who bravely went undercover as a town drunk to smash a Confederate sabotage ring. Because of this masterful spin, Lincoln's presidency was preserved from ruin, and Northern public morale actually skyrocketed overnight. I want to leave you all with this final thought. Phineas Phillips may have been an absolute mechanical genius, but as this explainer clearly shows, even the most cutting-edge gadgets in the world can't compete with a good old-fashioned American performance. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? When we look back at the grand events of the past, how much of the history we blindly accept as fact is actually just a desperately yet brilliantly executed cover story. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning what you read and keep learning.